You know that universal feeling of taking a job and immediately realizing you have absolutely no idea what you're doing? Almost everyone loves a classic sports movie trope, the hard-nosed coach who comes in to whip the team into shape and save the day, very Remember the Titans style. But what if you took that tired formula and brought in a folksy American football coach to manage a real football club over in England? And worse, a guy who was completely clueless about the beautiful game, hired on purpose by a super vengeful boss just to tank the club. That is exactly the brilliant premise of Ted Lasso. What had all the makings of just another over-the-top culture clash comedy ended up delivering something absurdly genius. Because beneath that ridiculous mustache and aggravating positivity, there's a whole lot of heart. It's a storyline that uses biscuit jokes and flawed game plans to dive deep into an almost therapeutic discussion about mental health, traumatic divorces, and fragile masculinity. That's why today on the channel, we're dissecting Ted Lasso, the brilliant series about football, where football is definitely the thing that matters the least. We meet Rebecca, the new owner of AFC Richmond, who kicks things off by firing the old manager for being a useless misogynist, calling the guy a fat wanker before getting mocked over her own divorce. Meanwhile, our country bumpkin protagonist named Ted Lasso crosses the ocean to take over the team. Despite being an American football coach who understands European football about as much as you understand touching grass. Speaking of which, he steps onto the stadium pitch and gives the kitman, Nate, an instant panic attack just by looking at his lost, clueless American face. After a useless tour where Ted asks if the boss is doing okay with her divorce, he gets thrown to the wolves in a chaotic press conference. A journalist with major resting judgmental face, Trent Krim, asks if his hiring is a sick joke. Rebecca steps in to calm the herd, dubbing the disaster the Lasso way. But as soon as the door closes, she reveals her evil master plan to burn the club to the ground just to get back at her ex-husband, promoting the director of communications to her personal accomplice. In the locker room, Ted and his trusty sidekick Coach Beard try to introduce themselves to the players, but get interrupted by Keely, one of the guy's girlfriends. Ted tries to make friends with the stressed-out veteran Roy, who accepts the compliment by calling him Coach Ronald fucking McDonald, and storms off spewing hatred. Focused on changing the vibe, Ted covers up a picture of giant boobs in someone's locker, gets some interior design tips from Keely, and decides to get off Twitter. But when he goes back to the hotel and calls his family, he realizes his own marriage is sinking faster than his team, as his wife asks for that classic space that everyone knows the true meaning of. Our coach wakes up on the wrong side of the bed, almost getting run over in the street if it weren't for Coach Beard saving his hide. Trying to be the most annoyingly nice guy in the world, Ted invades Rebecca's office with a little pink box of biscuits and sings Kenny Rogers to her, getting kicked out shortly after. On the pitch, his hands shake with panic while watching practice, and when he notices a rookie named Sam is down in the dumps after being humiliated by the spoiled brat Jamie, Ted gives him the stupidest advice possible, telling him to be a goldfish and forget everything in 10 seconds. Rebecca is so sickened by all this kindness that she orders her lackey Higgins to find out where he bought the biscuits. Meanwhile, Ted and Beard set up a suggestion box that quickly fills up with insults and a single complaint about the absolute crap shower water pressure. Ted runs into Keely, and she asks him whether he'd rather be a lion or a panda, and shortly after is seen hand-feeding her at a photo shoot because her hands were occupied with fake paws. Seeing the perfect chance to ruin the guy, Rebecca hires a photographer to snap this moment of purely platonic intimacy. In the locker room, the team tries to celebrate Sam's birthday. Ted hands him a little plastic soldier, but the kid politely declines because American imperialism isn't exactly a Nigerian's dream gift. The team hits the pitch only to be called wankers by the entire crowd and lose miserably. Roy gets so furious he hurls a water bottle onto the floor, but his rage melts away in the shower when he realizes the water pressure is finally thick, strong, and blasting against his body.
Careful, son.
Ignoring the loss, Ted hands out cake to everyone and refuses to tell Rebecca where the sweets came from. While the boss authorizes the leak of the incriminating photos to the press, we discover the greatest secret in this universe. Ted himself spends his late nights kneading the dough and baking the magic biscuits with his own bare hands. The cynical journalist Trent Krim decides to shadow our useless protagonist to write a detailed profile on the impending doom that is his leadership. Trent questions how anyone accepts a job without understanding absolutely anything about the sport or the country, just like you accepting adult responsibilities. During an Indian dinner, Ted drops the cliché speech that he just wants to make the players better people and doesn't care about winning, all while shoving absurdly spicy food down his throat just so he doesn't offend the waiter, melting his own stomach in the process. The public humiliation takes a weird turn because Trent publishes the article confessing that the American is going to sink the team, but that it's impossible not to root for him. When Higgins reads this atrocity out loud, Rebecca lets out a scream of frustration worthy of a defeated supervillain. Making her schemes even worse, Ted and Keely find out about the secret photos that are about to leak, and they rush to ask for help from the exact woman who planted the bomb. Rebecca plays the hero, promising to kill the publication while showing off an old bikini pic on a yacht that leaves Keely drooling over her boss's MILF physique. Down in the locker room, errand boy Nate is getting heavily bullied by Jamie and his goons. But surprisingly, Ted and Beard steal one of the Kitman's tactics for the pitch, using Jamie as useless bait while Sam scores the goals. This bruises the Star Striker's fragile ego, and he takes out his fury by doubling down on humiliating Nate. Roy gets pissed off at the cowardice and demands someone step up, but Ted plays dumb, manipulating the grumpy veteran into taking the leadership role on his own. And the crazy plan works. After reading a children's fantasy book to his niece and having a ridiculous epiphany, Roy storms into a packed nightclub, corners Jamie, and demands that he stop tormenting the Kitman before turning on his heel and disappearing into the night. It's the night of the charity gala, and Rebecca is hosting the event. Everyone brings a +1 to the party except for Rebecca herself, who is lonelier than you on Valentine's Day. Ted drags Nate along, Jamie shows off Keely, and everything seemed fine until Rebecca's ex-husband Rupert shows up out of nowhere to crash the party. This walking fossil starts spitting venom, subtly calling his ex fat while hijacking the player date auction. To make matters worse, the headlining musician cancels at the last minute, obviously sabotaged by Rupert. But Ted and Higgins find a busker named Cam Cole who saves the night, playing louder than Rebecca's internal weeping. Speaking of which, the blonde breaks down crying outside, and Ted offers a comforting hug to try and pick up the pieces. Meanwhile, the mustached coach decides to play therapist and forces grumpy Roy to sit at the same table as spoiled Jamie. The miracle happens when Ted makes Roy realize that, at 23, he was also an insufferable prick. Roy swallows his pride, suggests they lay their issues on the table, and they reach a rare agreement of mutual respect. At the auction, chaos reigns. Keely gets into a bidding war against a random blonde for her own boyfriend, only to find out later that Jamie, that piece of trash, brought this other woman as a backup date just to inflate his own ego. Trying to get back at him, Keely starts bidding on Roy, gives up halfway through, and leaves the veteran with bruised feelings. At least she has the decency to apologize to Roy before kicking Jamie to the curb for good, claiming the kid has zero accountability for his own actions. To cure her heartbreak, Keely steals 2 bottles of champagne and invites Rebecca to get hammered, proving that stolen alcohol is the foundation of the best friendships. Our hick coach's family crosses the pond to visit England. Ted shows off his wife Michelle and his son to the entire team like hunting trophies before stuffing them with fried fish at a local pub. But the picture-perfect family illusion crumbles when Ted catches Michelle crying in the corner. He uses their couples therapy safe word, Oklahoma, forcing his wife to be brutally honest. She confesses that she's squeezing her own heart trying to feel the same passion they had when they got married. But the truth is, she can't force happiness. On the pitch, tragedy also unfolds in the form of arrogance. Narcissist Jamie refuses to pass the ball, swearing the crowd just wants to see his own private little show. When Sam gets badly injured on a play and Jamie couldn't care less, Roy's blood boils and the two throw hands. Not to leave you there. Even with Jamie scoring a tying goal, the mustached coach decides he's had enough of the whiny toddler and benches the little star. During halftime, Ted gives one of those motivational speeches about embracing change, and by some divine miracle, the spell works. Without the dead weight of Jamie's ego on the pitch, the team finally learns to play together and finds the back of the net to secure their first win of the season. The entire stadium erupts in joy, with the sole exception of Rebecca, who watches the scene looking like she just chewed on a bee. With the victory secured, Ted goes back to the hotel only to face defeat in his personal life, as he and Michelle have the dreaded and inevitable final conversation about their failed marriage. A new player named Danny Rojas spawns onto the team, proving to be an absurd talent with the ball at his feet. This fits like a glove for the mustached coach, since the giant baby Jamie decided to go on strike and refuses to step onto the practice pitch, finally making Ted explode with rage. Taking advantage of the spoiled brat's absence, Ted puts Danny in his position. The terror of losing his throne makes Jamie whine in Keely's ear, and she simply tells her ex to stop fighting the people who are trying to fix his pathetic life. On the pitch, Danny trips over the wind and decides to blame it on a ghost curse from the treatment room. Apparently, the place carries a dark past from World War I. Buying into this mystical nonsense is Ted's favorite sport, so he summons the entire team to the locker room at night, ordering everyone to bring a meaningful item to burn in a trash can to appease the offended spirits. Surprisingly, Jamie shows up at the fire cult and burns something that reminds him of his mom. He almost makes the whole team cry by revealing that his mom just wanted to see him happy, while his abusive dad would psychologically torture him, calling him soft and weak whenever he messed up. The mood gets heavy, but soon the whole squad is singing around the fire and getting hammered on mezcal. Even Rebecca, who just got humiliated by the tabloids dubbing her Old Rebecca because of her ex's new girlfriend, gets invited by Sam to join the bonfire and burns the cursed headline in the flames. The next morning, Ted comes in smiling, only for Beard to dump a bucket of cold water on him, warning that Rebecca let Manchester City take Jamie back. The team's bonding night went completely down the drain. Ted marches into the boss's office boiling with hatred, but bites his tongue before committing murder. He places the little box of biscuits into her hand, drops the bomb that he was the master baker all along, and walks away foaming at the mouth until Danny Rojas pops up to remind the protagonist that football is life. The useless Richmond squad travels to Liverpool to get their asses handed to them by Everton. On the exact same weekend, Rebecca completes 1 year as the most bitter divorcee in England. To drown her sorrows, she kicks Higgins off her private jet and drags Keely and her wild friend Sassy on a girls' trip. Meanwhile, our mustached coach receives the divorce papers and is left with the emotional stability of a bowl of jello. Without spoiled Jamie, the players have already accepted defeat before even stepping onto the pitch. Desperate, Ted begs the cowardly Kitman Nate to write a motivational speech. The problem is, Nate tries to slide the paper under the door right when Ted is weeping about the end of his marriage, causing the American to bark like a rabid dog and tell him to get out. But the next day, Ted realizes he was being a dick, apologizes, and throws Nate into the fire, making him read the speech to the meatheads himself. The Kitman activates sociopath mode and starts ruthlessly roasting every player, saying Danny loses his man more than Carrie Bradshaw, and that Colin plays like a Brazilian waxing his private parts. The team of masochists loves the humiliation. Roy gets so turned on by the insults that he rips a wooden bench right out of the floor, leading the team to an absolute miracle where Richmond wins 1-0 with a goal from the angry grandpa himself. At the post-game party, Rebecca is belting out a Frozen song like a Disney diva, while Ted's brain goes into total meltdown. He suffers a massive panic attack and collapses on the sidewalk until Rebecca shows up to help him breathe like a functional human being again.
I'm sorry.
Okay, you're having a panic attack. Just breathe.
I'm going crazy.
With his mind back in place, Ted returns to his room and signs his single-man certificate. Meanwhile, Keely and Roy finally mash their faces together in a wet kiss, but the grumpy old man runs away right after, leaving the blonde completely confused. And to cap off the night, Rebecca flirts with a juicy waiter and pours her heart out to Sassy, feeling the weight of guilt kick in after receiving a sweet text from Ted. But Sassy has other plans and decides to break into the newly divorced guy's room to test out his American equipment. The next morning arrives with a monumental hangover and a flood of regrets. Ted wakes up looking dumbfounded after having his sadness cured by Sassy's disappearing act. Rebecca kicks her hot waiter out of bed, and Nate wakes up tossed on the bus like recyclable trash. With the divorce finalized and a wild night behind him, the American summons the Diamond Dogs, his male gossip circle, to process the fact that he's back on the singles market. But the peace doesn't last a single second. Rebecca drags Ted to a pub to negotiate club shares with two old ladies, only to run into the parasite Rupert and his trophy fiancée Bex. The narcissistic ex-husband hatched a plan to become an owner of the team again by buying their shares, so Ted and Rupert make a darts bet. If Ted wins, Rupert is banned from the owner's box. If Rupert wins, he gets to pick the starting lineup for the final games. Thinking he's dealing with a useless hick, Rupert takes the easy bet, but the American activates his stealth assassin mode and publicly humiliates the old man, revealing that he spent every Sunday throwing darts with his Roy's late father. Rebecca vibrates with joy, but soon shows she's still a vindictive bitch. When Higgins warns her that the stadium has 10,000 empty seats for the next game, she demands they let the away fans buy them all just to piss Rupert off with enemy colors. Higgins finally grows a spine, says he's done taking part in this sadistic clown show, and quits. Because a little misery is never enough, Keely finds out the boss set her up to get compromising photos taken with the coach. The blonde points a finger in Rebecca's face and gives her an ultimatum to confess everything. At the same time, Keely decides to complicate her own life by opening the door of hope to her spoiled ex, Jamie. When the grumpy Roy finally asks her out, the girl blurts out the truth about relapsing with his rival. The old man flips out, whines to the Diamond Dogs, and is told he needs to swallow his tears and man up. Roy takes the advice, takes the girl out on a date, and confesses that his big mysterious weekend secret is doing yoga with divorced old ladies and hanging out with drag queens. They swap fluids again, but are interrupted by a gross paparazzo. Roy confiscates the Vulture's memory card, handing Keely the original photos of her own boss's colossal setup on a silver platter. Grandpa Roy Kent decides to freeze his own balls off in an ice bath while watching the news declare the premature death of his career. Ted tries to pull the grumpy bastard out of his black hole of self-pity by calling him a bitter muppet, but the whole team is falling apart just one step away from the final match against Manchester City. Meanwhile, Keely corners Rebecca in a room full of smelly cleats and tells the posh boss to finally spill the beans about her setup. The boss tries to weasel her way out, claiming it wouldn't make a difference to reveal everything to the coach now, but the blonde destroys her arguments on the spot. Trying to clear her heavy conscience, Rebecca calls the American into her office to talk, but her toxic ex-husband emerges from the shadows to drop a radioactive bomb. He's having a baby with his new wife, the very whim he always denied Rebecca. Completely emotionally shattered, she finally vomits all her sabotage right to Ted's face. Instead of breaking everything and telling the British woman to go to hell, the American activates his Buddhist monk mode, says he understands the pathological crazy that divorce does to people, and forgives the woman in the blink of an eye, earning a guilt-ridden hug. On the pitch, Roy's geriatric body can't handle the stop-and-go drills anymore.
Shoot.
Nate and Beard feel the secondhand embarrassment and start giving the silent treatment to the dumb boss who refuses to bench the veteran. Ted tries to have a friendly chat with Roy about the sad reality of the situation, but the player throws a phenomenal fit and calls the coach a lying traitor. Running into the arms of his blonde girlfriend and his niece, Roy realizes the obvious. He's not just a piece of old meat kicking balls on a pitch, all thanks to a cute list from the little girl who doesn't even care about his pathetic career. At a dingy pub, Ted gets brutally checked by Coach Beard, who finally snaps and spits painful truths across the table. He rubs it in his face that winning does matter to professional athletes, and that one retired player's fragile ego isn't worth relegating the entire club. The American drowns his sorrows in a sea of beer and tries to get obliterated by a red bus on the street, but Roy grabs his shirt and saves the idiot at the last second. They make up right there in the middle of the street. Ted officially declares that Grandpa will be warming the bench disguised as an injury to protect his ego, and to the surprise of absolutely no one, Higgins comes crawling back to his old job. Accepting his cruel fate, old Roy swallows his tears and shows up to practice just to cheer on the morons he calls his teammates. Nate gets promoted, and Roy tries to throw his captain's armband in the trash like radioactive waste. Ted forces the grumpy old man to pick a successor, and he points to Isaac. The whole squad watches Jamie Tart acting like a hotshot on TV, and Isaac gets so pissed he throws a chair at the screen, shattering the glass and leaving Roy wet with pride at so much gratuitous violence. For the big game, the team's owner advises Ted to use his pathetic ignorance of football to his advantage, so Ted and his pet Beard start drawing up the most bizarre plays possible. Meanwhile, Jamie sees a video of Ted praising him, and his pea-brain short-circuits, thinking it's a Jedi mind trick. He goes crying to Keely for advice, and runs face first into her new romance with Roy, finding out the hard way that the universe doesn't revolve around his hair gel. The game is a total bore fest until the second half, when Roy comes off the bench fueled by pure flaming hatred. He tackles Jamie so many times that his own knee explodes into 1,000 pieces. He limps off to a standing ovation from the crowd, while the commentators declare the instant death of his career. Desperate for a tie, the team summons the Lasso Special, an American football formation so stupid that it confuses the opponents and bizarrely secures a goal. The fans go wild thinking they saved the team, but Jamie ruins the party by threading an extra pass to a teammate at the last second, completely destroying Richmond. Ted overhears Jamie's trash father humiliating the kid over the win, and makes sure a little green plastic soldier is delivered to him as a prize for finally learning to share his toys. Ted tries to hand in his resignation from his useless life, but Rebecca refuses, demanding they come back next year to crush everybody. Danny Rojas decides to show his love for the game by accidentally hitting a dog with the ball while taking a penalty kick. The canine mascot goes straight to the afterlife, and a massive PR nightmare swallows the team. Danny tries to scrub the guilt and the smell of death off his body by taking a shower in full uniform, falling into a depression so deep and dark that he magically forgets how to kick a simple ball.
Me merezco todo lo que me está pasando, Dios.
Higgins suggests a sports psychologist, and Ted agrees, even though he hates therapy because it did absolutely nothing for his failed marriage. Dr. Sharon steps onto the scene speaking fluent Spanish and French, completely castrating Ted's insecurities since she can penetrate the players' minds way better than he can. The woman ignores the coach's stupid jokes and fixes Danny's broken brain so efficiently that the entire team forms a giant line to work out their childhood trauma with her. Meanwhile, Rebecca decides to date a human piece of cardboard in a suit. She drags Keely and Roy on a double date just to test out the merchandise. Keely tries to be polite and sweet, but Roy spews all his venom, questioning why the hell Rebecca thinks she deserves to settle for such a pathetic guy. Rebecca realizes the grumpy old man is absolutely right, hears a dramatic swell of music, and kicks the boring suit to the curb, realizing she is way out of that irrelevant extras league and that her biscuit-fueled journey of self-discovery demands much more than a guy who is just fine. Jamie comes back with his tail between his legs after getting booted from a trashy, fifth-rate dating reality show. He goes on national television to explain his genius strategy of banging women in public restrooms, turning his own image into a radioactive sewer. His agent can only offer him a job snorting illicit substances in Ibiza, so Jamie goes crying to Keely, begging to come back to Richmond. Ted rejects the piece of trash, and the team almost commits a mass murder just seeing a leaked photo of the two of them together. Sam vents about how Jamie used to suck his soul out on the pitch, and Ted promises that the spoiled kid will never set foot in there again. But when Sam praises the team's safe environment, Ted's brain melts thinking about Jamie's garbage father. After the doctor rubs it in Ted's face that his team is a machine for losing games, he ignores world peace and drags Jamie back to practice, making everyone want to claw their own eyes out. Roy finishes coaching a group of little girls and catches Keely watching his retirement video and crying like a needy baby. She tells him to swallow his tears and get a real job that actually means something. The old man agrees to be a sports pundit, swearing at everyone live on air and becoming an absolute hit immediately. Higgins hires the doctor for the entire season, and Ted tries desperately to seduce the woman by shoving his creamy little biscuits down her throat, but the spell fails miserably. Ted and Rebecca agree that therapy is only for losers with no friends, ignoring the minor detail that they are both two emotional time bombs waiting to explode and completely incapable of looking at their own faces in the mirror. Our prodigy player Sam is grinning from ear to ear for being the poster boy for Dubai Air, until his dad reveals that the company's parent corporation is literally bathing his homeland of Nigeria in toxic oil and bribing the government. Sam decides to jump the sinking ship, and boss lady Rebecca promises to clean up the mess. The corporate suit who owns the oil company orders Rebecca to fire the kid immediately, but she prefers to play the petty queen and, with the help of a 13-year-old brat, sends an email telling the billionaire to take a hike. Meanwhile, the spoiled brat Jamie tries to buy his teammates dignity by handing out next-gen gaming consoles. Seeing the team fractured, our mustached coach fakes a psychotic breakdown, activating his evil alter ego, Led Tasso. He screams at and humiliates everyone to force the team to hate him instead of Jamie, which magically gives the pretty boy the chance to play the hero by defending his teammates from the boss's yelling. In the locker room, Sam looks in the mirror and decides he's not going to wear the logo of a company destroying his country right on his chest. He grabs a roll of black duct tape and covers the sponsor on his kit, prompting his fellow players to instantly mimic the gesture. Jamie stands up, asks for the tape, and announces that the whole team will wear the exact same thing, slapping it onto his own shirt and sparking a collective rebellion in the locker room. The team steps onto the pitch looking like a bunch of taped-up vandals, which instantly drives the media insane. Rebecca ignores the panicked billionaire's calls, and at the press conference, the Yankee coach confesses he planned absolutely nothing, but praises Sam's courage before handing the mic over over to him. Sam completely ignores the humiliating defeat they just suffered and uses the spotlight to expose the Nigerian government's corruption live on national television. The coach applauds the kid and the entire team toasts the fact that they finally broke their endless streak of ties by straight up losing the game.
What's going on?
We are celebrating.
But we lost.
Yeah, but we broke the tie streak.
The team is having a secret Santa in the locker room, hosted by Isaac dressed in a completely ridiculous Santa Claus outfit. While one player gets a cute little scarf, the rest receive liters of booze to drown the sorrows of a depressing season where they've racked up 14 frustrating draws. Obviously, the egocentric Jamie forgot to buy anything, forcing the coaches to cobble together a last-minute emergency gift so he doesn't embarrass himself in front of everyone. Christmas plans are all over the place, with Nate visiting his family, the bearded beard going to see giant rocks in the middle of nowhere with his crazy girlfriend, and bombshell Keely planning an extremely sweaty and sensual holiday with Roy. But the erotic fantasy goes down the drain when Roy's niece is dropped off at their house in a ridiculously foul mood. The kid finally confesses that a little boy at school made fun of her breath, and when Roy and Keely get close to the girl's mouth, they almost pass out from a smell resembling radioactive sewage. Since it's Christmas Eve and the house smells like death, the couple's only option is to knock on doors around town like Jehovah's Witnesses until they find a charitable dentist. The doctor confirms that the girl took cat allergy meds that dried her mouth out, turning her breath into a lethal chemical weapon. The professional suggests throwing the cat away, but Keely refuses to abandon the furry creature and accepts a simple prescription. Still foaming at the mouth with rage over the schoolyard insult, Caveman Roy drags Keely and his niece to the bully's front door, holding giant cue cards. Mimicking the most cliché scene from romance movies, the girl shows the threatening cards demanding respect, while Roy growls like a wild animal in the background to ensure the kid gets thoroughly traumatized. The little boy apologizes, crapping his pants in fear, and the Christmas spirit is duly restored through panic and psychological intimidation. Nate wants to celebrate his parents' anniversary at an upscale Greek restaurant, but the snobbish hostess simply ignores him. Frustrated by being treated like disposable garbage, he whines about his problems to Rebecca and Keely. The boss lady tries to turn this harmless man into an aggressive alpha male, teaching him a bizarre giant bird pose to intimidate enemies from afar. The ridiculous technique doesn't work, so Nate goes to the bathroom, spits at his own reflection in the mirror like a sociopath in training, and finally gathers enough courage to march back out, confront the hostess, and snatch the coveted window table by barking at her. Meanwhile, Captain Isaac is having a premature midlife crisis in the middle of the pitch, completely out of his own head. The mustached coach realizes he needs a dominant gorilla to fix his team's issue, and goes to beg for Roy's help at a greasy kebab shop, only to get kicked to the curb by the grumpy veteran. Eventually, Roy accepts the dirty job and drags Isaac and the coach to a local neighborhood playground. The intensive therapy consists of making a millionaire football player humiliate random children by playing street ball on the asphalt. The recreational slaughter reminds Isaac that kicking balls is supposed to be purely fun, and his brain magically starts working again. Roy goes back to his suit and tie TV job, but upon seeing the positive damage he did to Isaac's mind, he finally realizes his true passion is screaming at grown-ass men on wet grass. Channeling the desperate female lead of a cheap rom-com, he dramatically quits his job on live TV, runs wildly through the snowy streets, and storms into the stadium mid-match to join the coaching staff. Everyone celebrates the arrival of the new alpha on the bench, except for Nate, who watches the scene sweating bullets, realizing his spot as the favored advisor was just stolen by a guy who takes pleasure in growling at children. AFC Richmond is steamrolling everyone and wins their 4th straight match. But Jamie is throwing a hissy fit because the new coach, Roy, who's taking all the credit, refuses to even look him in the face. When Roy finally caves, he gives it to him straight. It's the mustached protagonist's fault for turning Jamie into a mediocre player by forcing team friendship. Roy tells him to embrace his inner prick, teaching him that the key to success is controlling his toxic arrogance and weaponizing it. Then, during a critical moment against Tottenham, the entire coaching staff flips Jamie the middle finger. It's the sacred signal. He activates full narcissistic ego mode, plays entirely for himself, and secures another colossal victory. Meanwhile, Rebecca is getting raped by the hunky Luca, but her mother shows up out of nowhere to announce she's dumped her husband. Ted and Keely treat this like a canon event, but Rebecca doesn't give a crap about the situation, knowing the old man always offers an expensive gift, and the woman goes running back with her tail wagging, true to form. She tries to have a serious talk with her mom, only to find out the old lady got a brand new Tesla and is already headed straight back into matrimonial captivity. Frustrated, Rebecca goes back to riding Luca, but keeps flirting on a blind dating app with a mysterious stud, who is actually Sam, her very own player, though neither of them has any idea who's sending the messages. In another corner, Higgins is the only guy in the group with the balls to warn Beard that his psycho girlfriend is a radioactive hazard. He tries to be gentle, gets ignored, and then decides to step on the gas and deliver the naked, ugly truth. Beard returns the favor with a bone-crushing hug of gratitude. Shortly after, the crazy chick forces Beard to wear a ridiculous newsboy cap, proving that Higgins was absolutely right. In the middle of a major game, the mustache man's brain short-circuits. The panic attack returns full force. His hands tingle, reality melts, and he flees the pitch like a coward. Rebecca tries to look for him, but the coach goes to hide in the dark of Dr. Sharon's office, begging for a session. The mustached hick thinks he wants therapy, but sits in Dr. Sharon's chair and decides to chicken out. He walks in and out, whines, and even has the audacity to trash the woman's profession, complaining that charging for 50 minutes is a scam and that she doesn't care about anyone. On his third attempt at being a man, Sharon puts him in his place, reminding him that they're both paid to pretend they care about people. He finally tucks his tail between his legs and sits down to talk. Meanwhile, Roy is lost in a bizarre love trance, staring at Keely in bed, in the kitchen, and wanting to follow the girl every single step she takes. Keely can't stand this clingy puppy behavior anymore and goes to vent to Rebecca and Higgins. When Roy finds out he's become gossip fodder for being an emotional stage 5 clinger, his fragile ego takes a hit, feeling the crushing humiliation of being vulnerable. But during practice, salvation comes from the most unlikely place. Roy yells at Jamie for standing too far from a teammate, and the prick replies that his partner needed space. The 80-watt light bulb goes off in Roy's head. He runs home, draws a hot bath, throws in some stolen rose petals, and promises to disappear for 3 hours so his woman can soak in peace. As for useless Nate, he thinks he's a golden god with his self-proclaimed new nickname, the Wunderkind. His mom kisses his ass, but his dad continues to not give a crap about his son's existence, ensuring the kid stays traumatized. With a head the size of a hot air balloon, Nate decides to humiliate player Colin with a cruel and completely senseless rant. Beard emerges from the shadows and tells him to stop bullying the kid. Nate lowers his head, offers a perfectly rehearsed apology, but the second Beard turns his back, he chooses to dump all his radioactive fury onto the poor newbie Kitman. Dr. Sharon starts the day getting diagnosed by her own therapist, who throws in her face the fact that she hides behind her intellect the exact same way the mustache man hides behind bad jokes. To escape the truth, she goes riding her little folding bike until a car decides to run her over on the asphalt. The hit results in a concussion and a series of drugged-up voice notes sent to Ted, who rushes to the hospital to play chauffeur. He takes the doctor to her depressing corporate apartment, where he discovers the woman fills her existential void by chugging the contents of several empty bottles scattered around the house. For the first time, Sharon admits she was scared. Judgment Day arrives against Manchester City. Jamie is forced to give tickets to his own dad and his buddies, who show up to the stadium with the sole purpose of rooting against the kid. After a humiliating defeat, the old man invades the locker room to spit venom in Jamie's face and harass the broken team. Jamie swallows his pride until he reaches his breaking point and simply buries his fist into his father's face.
Buckle me, you pussy! Oh! Ah! Oh!
Beard ejects the human trash from the room instantly. In dead silence, Roy, who spent the entire episode trying not to teach his niece how to swear, decides to cross the locker room and give his worst rival a massive hug. Dealing with the trauma of the massacre, Ted's brain threatens to melt again. He calls Sharon and word vomits his core trauma, revealing that his father killed himself when he was 16. While the misery unfolds, the dating app meetup finally happens. Sam gets his one and only haircut of the season and heads to the location, only to find his elderly boss. Rebecca goes into a full-blown panic for almost devouring a 21-year-old employee, but the kid convinces the woman to stay for dinner. At her front door, they share a quick kiss before the older woman pulls back, feigning decency. But after the colossal loss to City, she sees Sam on TV talking about effort, and the loneliness hits hard. She texts him, and he replies with his own address, but when she opens her door to head over, the prodigy kid is already standing right there. When she questions the logic of the text, he tells her that address is for next time and walks into the apartment to seal the deal. Our stoic bearded coach decides to ditch the team to cure his blues, but ends up haunted by the of sports commentators judging his incompetence, forcing him to flee to the pub. After whining that his psycho girlfriend didn't say "I love you," he teams up with 3 local drunks and wears trash from the Lost and Found to sneak into an elite club. Using his advanced lying skills, he convinces a bunch of rich snobs that he's an arrogant Oxford professor, right up until he rips his pants in the middle of the bar and gets kicked to the curb like a vagrant. A woman in a red dress finds the situation pathetic enough to take him home, but instead of getting any action, he gets a dead guy's sequined pants and lies on the couch to vent about his love life problems. The woman's boyfriend busts the door down and our favorite coward jumps into a dumpster, losing his wallet, phone, and keys. Wandering aimlessly through a dark tunnel, he runs straight into his own player's abusive dad and his gang, who start beating the crap out of him without mercy. Luckily, the red dress woman's cheated on boyfriend shows up, but only to return the bearded man's lost items. Climbing out of the hole, he gets bombarded by bipolar texts from his ex and screams in sheer despair. The local drunks rescue him in a limo they got by scamming some suckers, and he hands them the keys to the stadium so they can mess around on the pitch in the dead of night. Unable to get into his own house, he takes shelter in a church that magically hides a secret underground rave. He starts aggressively grinding to exorcise his demons until his ex sprouts from the floor and hands him a hula hoop to gyrate with. The next morning, our assistant coach shows up to work in his sparkly pants and sips coffee while watching the fast-forward replay of the team's humiliating defeat to the sound of clown music. The team owner and her African boy toy keep secretly hooking up until her mother barges into the kitchen and ruins the mood by announcing that her father has kicked the bucket. On the miserable old man's funeral day, her manipulative ex-husband shows up just to be a pest, while the boss lady's friends figure out she's sucking the youth out of the athlete and celebrate the perversion. Our American coach tries to get dressed at home but suffers a nervous breakdown, shaking like a chihuahua. He calls the team's psychologist, who rushes over to bring order to his mental mess. It is revealed that on the exact same cursed day, the team owner caught her dad cheating on her mom. Our coach's dad decided to delete himself from existence, creating 2 perfectly damaged adults. At the church, the grieving daughter has no clue what to say at the pulpit, so she decides to recite the lyrics to a catchy internet pop song. When she starts crying into the mic, the coach bursts into the church running late and picks up the tune, getting all the stuffy suits to join in on a bizarre funeral musical. Outside, the ex-husband whispers some poison into the ear of the useless assistant coach. To make the event worse, the team owner suffers a sudden bout of maturity and breaks up with the hot player because she's scared of getting hurt. Amidst this chaos, the model's egocentric ex-boyfriend takes advantage of the funeral vibes to confess his love for her. The grumpy current boyfriend walks in shortly after, apologizes for making dead body jokes, and reaffirms that he loves her, leaving her trapped in a love triangle literally nobody asked for. The boss's African sweetie is playing so well that he catches the eye of a weirdo billionaire who drops out of a helicopter right onto the pitch. But he doesn't want to buy the team. He wants to buy the kid and take his talents back to Africa. The team owner, desperate over losing her favorite toy, tries to play it cool, but ends up sitting by the kid's door, silently begging him to keep scoring for her. In another useless subplot, the model is about to be featured in a fancy magazine and decides to help the pathetic assistant coach buy a suit. However, in a sudden fit of delusion and overconfidence, the garden gnome just lunges and smashes his mouth against hers. She tries to sweep the bizarre harassment under the rug, but later drops the bomb on her grumpy boyfriend. He couldn't care less about the pint-sized threat, but gets genuinely furious when he finds out her handsome ex was also prowling around his territory. Meanwhile, our half-baked American coach is teaching grown-ass men a teen pop dance routine as a farewell gift for the psychologist. The woman skips town before the party, leaving only letters behind, triggering the boss's chronic fear of abandonment as he hunts her down across the city. He whines about his feelings at her apartment, reads the damn letter, and they both go get wasted at the pub. In a moment of petty revenge, he sneaks out, leaving a little plastic army man drowned in her beer. Back at the office, the backstabbing assistant draws up a new tactic that the coach immediately accepts. Jealous of not being the center of attention, the little squirt complains and rejects the bearded coach's crazy advice about fungus. The real stab in the back is revealed when a journalist texts the head coach, letting him know that his pathetic pathetic panic attack is going to be splashed across tomorrow's front page, all because his envious assistant leaked his own boss's secrets. After the gossip journalist exposes the protagonist's panic attack, the mustached coach gets dragged by the media, but receives love and support from everyone, except his bleached blonde assistant. The little Judas reveals his betrayal the second he walks into work, but the protagonist chooses to wait for an apology that's never going to come. Meanwhile, the bearded veteran corners the egocentric striker to knock his teeth out for hitting on his girlfriend, but the kid chokes back tears, takes the blame, and acts like a functional adult, leaving the veteran completely deflated and with no excuse to punch someone in the face.
Fuck!
The blonde model gets funding to start her own PR agency, and when the team owner finds out, she cries tears of pride, only to immediately discover that her scumbag ex-husband bought West Ham just to keep being a pain in the ass. At the blonde's house, the veteran realizes he's been cropped out of every single magazine photo with her, feeling his masculinity shrink. To make matters worse, the midget assistant confesses that he tried to force his mouth onto the blonde's, but when the veteran says he doesn't care, the offended kid finds it absolutely insulting not to be taken seriously as a romantic threat. Mid-game, the dwarf's tactic fails miserably. The protagonist decides to stick to the plan, and the team chooses to trust it, but the assistant finally has a full-blown psychotic meltdown. He calls him an absolute joke and cries about not getting enough attention, proving he's just a needy child. The game reaches its final minutes, and the smiling Mexican looks at the new helmet-wearing canine mascot before scoring the tying goal, securing the team's promotion and proving that football is life. While the veteran headbutts the egocentric striker just so he can give him a sweaty hug, the Nigerian player rejects the African billionaire's offer, causing the rich guy to throw a colossal hissy fit of catastrophic proportions. The journalist gets fired for being an unprincipled gossip. The blonde and the veteran enter an existential crisis about their vacation. The Nigerian decides to open a restaurant, and the little Judas takes over West Ham as the new Dark Lord. The protagonist ships his son back to the States and decides to cure his depression by calling the team psychologist, entirely unaware that she's locked her door to fool around with some mysterious man's meat. At the office, the team owner finds out the entire media predicted Richmond will finish in the gutter of the league, while her ex-husband's West Ham is set to shine. But the mustache man refuses to sign any new players, trusting in the power of friendship, while the little Judas bleaches his hair and creates a dumbline drill to humiliate his new players, getting the team owner incredibly turned on by so much cruelty. While the blonde cries from stress in an office where the former boss used to harass employees, the protagonist decides to solve his squad's crisis of confidence by taking a bunch of millionaires to sniff crap in the London sewers. He uses the sea of human waste as a profound metaphor that they shouldn't care about the shit other people talk about them. During the press conferences, the bleached dwarf panics from anxiety, hides under a desk, and tries to regain his posture by calling the protagonist a sewer rat. But when it's the mustache man's turn, he simply praises the traitor and puts on a stand-up comedy show that wins over all the reporters, making the dwarf boil with rage while receiving a brand new car from his master manipulator. The bearded veteran finally confesses to his niece that he broke things off with the blonde, only to get absolutely schooled and humiliated by the child, who spells it out for him that he's being a complete idiot. The mustache man goes back home to play with his Lego figures, placing the miniature Judas right back next to him, proving that his toxic positivity is immune to any stab in the back, all while admiring a massive infinity gauntlet. The blonde realizes her employees have the energy of a funeral and tries to drag everyone to an escape room to force some intimacy. The gossip journalist decides to write a book about the team, and the protagonist ignores the smoke signals from all his bosses begging him to refuse, accepting the idea with a goofy smile. Shortly after, news breaks that an arrogant superstar named Zava wants to play in England because his wife is addicted to a comedy show, and the team owner decides to burn millions on him just to make sure her ex-husband chokes on his rage over breakfast. The bearded veteran tries to hide the fact that he got dumped by the blonde, but the egocentric striker reads his body language. Forced to share an office with the journalist, the veteran acts like a childish psychopath, popping party balloons just to torture the guy and run him out of the room. Meanwhile, the blonde hires her chaotic friend to work at the agency, and when the CFO proves the girl isn't even qualified to sweep the floor, they simply invent a useless phantom job title for her. At the big match against Chelsea, the bearded veteran gets a standing ovation from the entire crowd, but the team ends the first half eating dust. The team owner panics when she sees her ex-husband seducing superstar Zava in the stands. Without a second thought, she storms into the men's restroom, corners the living legend while he empties his bladder, and spits in his face that going to West Ham would be the move of a lazy coward, daring him to prove his worth on an actual underdog team. In the locker room, the veteran finally corners the journalist and reveals that he's held a grudge for years over a disgusting article the guy wrote when he was just a rookie kid. After an apology, the tension clears, and the smiling Mexican scores a miraculous tying goal at the end of the match.
Obi Sanya's gonna have a go! Oh, it's in off the face of Rohan!
To top it all off, the narcissistic superstar shocks the universe at the press conference, rejecting the rich snobs and signing with Richmond, leaving the scumbag ex-husband completely humiliated and speechless. Colin kisses his partner and drives off as well as a blind man, crashing into trash cans on his way to the stadium. Meanwhile, the coaches debate which player will be sacrificed on the altar of the team's new superstar, Zava, who decided to ghost everyone and leave the team owner foaming at the mouth. After signing his contract by writing "You're welcome" instead of his actual name, this monument to ego is found in the boss's office, gobbling up cookie crumbs from her desk like a city pigeon. He heads down to the locker room, mistakes the Wonder Kid for the team's kitman, takes a deep breath as if inhaling his own greatness, and scribbles all over the tactics board, setting the entire team up to play behind him. In the meantime, the boss visits a knockoff psychic who predicts a green matchbox and tells her she's going to be a mother, causing her to freak out and run away exactly like you running from your responsibilities. At the office, a chaotic blonde who used to eat her own hair suggests gross marketing campaigns, and the Wonder Kid cries to the coaches that the newbie is too egocentric, an irony so juicy the coaches almost choke to death on it. The game begins, and while the mustachioed coach has a near nervous breakdown after calling his ex-wife's new boyfriend, the newbie simply shoots from midfield and buries the ball in the back of the net. An absurd winning streak takes off, and the team goes out to celebrate by getting hammered at a restaurant. The Wonder Kid, tired of being useless, agrees to be trained by the grumpy veteran at 4 in the morning. The team owner nearly falls out of her chair when the Nigerian player hands her the exact green matchbox from the prophecy. And as the night winds down, the gossipy journalist catches Colin swallowing his partner's face in the middle of the street, ensuring the circus will never stop burning. The grumpy veteran breaks down the Wonder Kid's door at 4 in the morning to make him run until he pukes, while our mustachioed coach wakes up with his friend with benefits, only to be humiliated when she calls him an emotional dumpster fire and refuses a real date. Far away from there, the traitorous ex-assistant plays with plastic figures, planning how to annihilate his old team. In the locker room, the yellow motivation sign starts falling apart, revealing to the players that the traitor ripped that piece of crap before fleeing, leaving everyone frothing with rage. The assistants show the security tape to the mustache, begging to use it as a weapon, but he refuses, preferring to keep his good guy aura rather than get his hands dirty. The day of the big game against the evil ex-husband's team arrives. The head of PR has an intestinal disaster in the bathroom and gets helped by a stranger, only to discover minutes later that the savior of her behind is her own new billionaire investor. In the hallways, the mustache gets stuck in the elevator with the traitor, who even tries to apologize before the senior villain shows up and kills the mood. On the pitch, the team takes a humiliating beating in the first half. The assistants, ignoring orders, show the players the video of the traitor tearing the sign. The result is a bloodbath where the team loses its mind, hands out dropkicks, gets 3 red cards, and swallows a pathetic 4-1 loss. While the team owner catches her ex-husband burying his face in another woman, the mustache confiscates the flash drive of Discord and refuses to punish his cleated butchers. The traitor goes to drown his guilt at a rich people party full of models, the Wonder Kid runs off for another late-night torture session, and the mustache finally calls his ex-wife to complain that she's sleeping with their couple's therapist. The team keeps rolling downhill and the club owner finally loses her patience, screaming at the coach while the assistants blame blame everyone down to their mothers for the losses. To worsen her sanity, she runs into her useless ex-boyfriend at a restaurant, and his new fiancé drops the exact bizarre phrase the psychic predicted, proving the universe loves playing her for a fool. In the PR office, the chaotic blonde suggests creating an app just to bank celebrities, forcing the boss to fire the girl, who freaks out and leaves behind a live sheep taking a crap on the rug. The mustachioed coach gets a text saying his precious son is being bullied, only to discover hours later that the brat is actually the little monster beating up the others. The team owner goes to the doctor to see if her eggs still work and realizes she's so lonely she has no one to put down as an emergency contact. The day to face the Manchester juggernaut arrives, but the great egocentric superstar simply decides to vanish, forcing the team to put the closeted kid on the pitch. While the squad gets massacred 4-0 on the grass, the traitorous ex-assistant takes his Russian supermodel out to eat at a cheap diner. She's disgusted by the peasant food and ditches him at the table, leaving him to beg for attention from the sarcastic waitress. In the office, smelling like sheep crap, the head of marketing ends up shoving her tongue down her billionaire investor's throat. The team owner gets her doctor's results, and the news that her egocentric star just retired mid-season.
Followers, you are my believers. And so I have to tell you, Zava has played his last match.
In the locker room, the coach calms his losers down, rips the last half of the yellow motivation sign off the wall, and tears it all into 1,000 pieces, screaming that they don't need a useless piece of paper to believe in themselves. The team of losers gets thoroughly thrashed by Ajax, and Ted takes everyone off their leash for a rule-free night in Amsterdam. While the mustachioed protagonist is ghosted on WhatsApp by his own boss, the preppy Jamie drags the grumpy old Roy on a forced romantic tour of the city, leaving the veteran completely exhausted. Rebecca gets run over by a pack of cyclists, falls into the canal like a trash bag, and is fished out by a stranger on a boat. She decides to shower at the guy's place, wears his ex's clothes, and after a flirt-heavy dinner, mysteriously spills wine on her own dry clothes just to have an excuse to stay in the cozy boat hole until the next morning. Higgins drags the team's sidekick to the famous red light district, but they both end up in a tedious jazz bar jamming with the local old-timers. While the players spend hours arguing about where to get hammered, Colin sneaks off to a gay bar and gets cornered by the gossip-hungry journalist, who surprisingly just wanted to talk about how he also came out of the closet in his youth. With no one to play with, Ted drinks a highly suspicious magic tea brewed by Beard and heads to the museum to stare at Van Gogh's sunflowers. Afterward, he downs barbecue sauce at an American diner until his brain fries in hallucinations about sacred triangles, creating a revolutionary soccer tactic. Roy finally confesses he doesn't know how to ride a bike because his grandpa kicked the bucket before teaching him, so Jamie decides to mount 2 wheels and teach the old man to pedal in the middle of the street, resulting in a disastrous wipeout right after. The next morning, the bearded assistant lets him know that Ted's genius tactic was already invented by the Dutch in the 70s. The bus finally speeds off with the whole team singing Bob Marley like a bunch of slackers. Tactical training becomes a nightmare when Ted decides to force the grown men to run until they puke their guts out on the pitch. The only exception is Jamie, who had already been sweating his own juice under the grumpy captain's whip. At the office, Keely is being smothered by an overly intense girlfriend who can't stop showering her with gifts, handing out rare books, paying for dinners, and even shoving a diamond ring inside a croissant. The blonde finally grows a spine, tells the rich lady to hold her wallet and stop acting like Rebecca's sociopathic ex-husband. Sam uses his angry fingers on the internet to fight conservative politicians, but the joke costs him when his restaurant's storefront is smashed and the walls are tagged. Fortunately, his giant dad shows up to give him a bear hug, and all the players turn into construction workers to clean up the mess and fill their bellies together. Meanwhile, traumatized errand boy Nate tries to convince the goth waitress to go out with him, trips in the middle of the street crushing his gift box, but somehow gets a yes. To teach the concept of positional awareness, Roy ties a red string to each player's junk, connecting all the team's members into one big, disastrous tangle of sausages. They head into the game against Arsenal tied by fate, but start butting heads until Jamie opens his mouth in the locker room and explains how the foreign tactic actually works. The team finally gets it, scores a majestic goal, but since reality hurts, they lose the match anyway, leaving the mustachioed coach smiling at the end as if he had just lifted the World Cup. The miracle happens and the team of losers strings together 4 straight wins, but the coach's joy is short-lived when Ted finds out his ex-wife traveled to Paris with the traitor therapist. Desperate, he tries to hire a private investigator to snoop on whether the woman is getting a ring, crying his eyes out to the team owner. Amidst the chaos, an intimate video of Keely leaks online, causing widespread panic. Isaac forces the locker room brutes to delete all the filth from their phones and ends up confiscating Colin's device. He discovers his teammate's colorful secret, but merely nods in silent approval. Keely's billionaire girlfriend tries to run damage control by writing a robotic apology, but Keely puts her foot down, saying she's not ashamed of having recorded her glorious body, causing the rich lady to vanish in a huff. Shortly after, Jamie shows up with his tail between his legs, confessing the video leaked from an old email of his, but he gets a hug from his ex instead of a slap. While former Kitman Nate tries to copy Ted's moral support group and fails miserably, Ted takes the day off to take his son to the rival team's game. He almost gets kicked out by the local pub owner and gets a call from the boss telling him to stop acting like an obsessive psycho and leave his ex-wife alone. The American accepts reality, ditches the PI and starts belting out the Beatles at the top of his lungs. He watches through the window like a nosy neighbor and breathes a sigh of relief seeing his ex return from Paris without a shiny ring on her finger, while his son walks right past the therapist as if the guy were an invisible ghost. On the Nelson Road pitch, our favorite grump Roy Kent finally expresses a drop of joy over the team's new tactic, which is a miracle in itself. Meanwhile, Colin desperately tries to chat with Isaac about his newly revealed secret, but gets ignored with the same coldness as a bitter ex-girlfriend. On the flip side, Ted drops off a little consolation gift for Keely just because her ghosting billionaire decided to end things via text straight from Argentina. After the good deed, Ted flees the press conference to deal with his ex-wife, letting Beard take the mic. The result is Beard declaring war on the reporters over music until Rebecca drags the lunatic out by the scruff of his neck. She then demands that Roy get his act together and stop running away from tough situations exactly like you running from your bills. In the West Ham lair, mini-villain Nate is getting snacks from his goth waitress when the Dark Lord Rupert sprouts from the shadows, inviting Nate out for a boys' night. But in the middle of the Richmond game, the pressure cooker explodes. Colin and Isaac fight on the pitch, and when a fan drops a bigoted comment in the stands, Isaac simply jumps the fence to turn the guy's face into pate. Straight red card. Absolute chaos. In the locker room, Isaac throws the captain's armband at Sam just to snub Jamie and storms off fuming. Despite the tactical mess, Richmond wins the game and Colin is named man of the match. Nate arrives at Rupert's VIP little club, sees the decrepit old man surrounded by women, and in a surge of decency, decides to do a U-turn and stay faithful to his girlfriend. Roy swallows his tears, takes over the presser, and delivers a philosophical speech about empathy that would make any grown man sweat from his eyes. In the dead of night, Isaac goes to Colin's house. After some soap opera drama, he understands why his friend lied for so long, apologizes for his primal rage, and the two end the night trading passes on FIFA as if nothing happened. Richmond is sweeping the league on a 10-game winning streak, but the real gossip is that traitor prodigy Nate bounced from West Ham and now spends his days depressed in bed. The international break arrives, tearing apart friendships in the squad, with Danny Rojas deciding that Van Dam is now his mortal enemy, crushing his snacks on the plane and breaking the guy's nose in the middle of a game. Meanwhile, a financial nightmare knocks on Keely's door. The money mysteriously dries up, the agency closes, and she's left crying alone until Rebecca arrives playing fairy godmother and dumps a mountain of pounds to save the business. The infinite money villain, Edwin Akufu, emerges from the darkness to create an evil super league. Worse yet, the guy bought the Nigerian government to ban Sam from the national team. On the so-called Uncle's Day, Grumpy Roy gets a hideous homemade shirt from his niece, and shortly after another shirt from Jamie, proving he attracts all sorts of lunatics. After flirting dangerously with the girl's teacher, Roy suffers an emotional short circuit and ends up dumping all his repressed feelings right on Keely's doorstep. At the fateful Super League meeting, Akufu tries to seduce the rich old men with his profit graphs, but Rebecca delivers a speech so majestic that the suits vote against it and cancel everything on the spot. Akufu flips out, throws food at everyone, and stomps off, leaving Rebecca and her cuckolded ex-husband rolling with laughter. Speaking of the devil, Rupert Rupert tries a cheap pickup line on Rebecca and gets a solid rejection, so he'll stop being such a loser. Nate is at his parents' house, sadly playing the violin until his dad finally apologizes for being a taskmaster his whole life. Full of epiphanies, Nate sneaks into the Richmond locker room to leave a forgiveness letter. And in a peak of shared insanity, Ted and Rebecca decide they want to win just for the team, cementing the promise by spitting their drinks right in each other's faces. Ted is walking the streets spreading his toxic positivity when he bumps into his own mother sprouting on a park bench. She had already been in the country for a week spying on her son, and soon goes to the stadium to burn the coach's rep by telling embarrassing stories to the entire team. Meanwhile, Nate has hit rock bottom in terms of glamour and is bussing tables at a Greek restaurant. The Richmond players try to rescue him from this Satsuki purgatory, but since Ted himself didn't send a VIP invite, he turns down the offer. Before the colossal game against Manchester City, Jamie has the energy of a rotting potato. Roy locks the kid in the boot room, where Jamie starts crying, confessing he is exhausted. Keeley tries to play therapist with him the night before the game and only makes things worse, forcing the poor guy to run into his own mother's arms in the dead of night looking for advice. Game time arrives, and the city crowd boos Jamie mercilessly. But the kid revs his engine, gets an assist for Colin, and then almost blows out his own ankle, saving a ball off the goal line, leaving the team a man down. Nate is following the game from afar until his goth girlfriend decides to threaten the restaurant boss, forcing the guy to fire Nate so he'll finally ditch the apron. Elsewhere, Ted tells Jamie to stop crying over his absent dad and forgive the old man to get that anchor off his back. In a surge of heroic adrenaline, Jamie limps back onto the pitch, nails an absurd goal, and gets a standing ovation even from his own dad, who is watching from rehab. Richmond wins the match and the world goes crazy. Far from the celebration, Ted forces Beard to watch the video of Nate ripping the sacred sign and, bizarrely, dies laughing. Beard gets angrier than a stray dog, but ends up knocking on Nate's door in the dead of night. He reminds him that he was once human trash that Ted forgave, and swallowing his pride, gives Nate his job back.
Monday, 10 a.m.
Ted finally confronts his mother about the weird silence regarding his father's suicide. The shit hits the fan, truths are spoken, and the two end the night hugging like in a margarine commercial. The following morning, while Rupert's ex-wife and current wife arrive at Rebecca's house to hatch a revenge scheme, Ted walks into the office where his boss is waiting and tells her that this time, he's the one with a bombshell to drop. The soccer apocalypse is here, and the Premier League title relies on a miraculous cosmic combination. Our depressed mustache already has his bags packed to skip the country, but first he has to endure the entire Richmond squad doing a farewell musical choreography worthy of a high school choir. Behind the scenes, our two sweaty alpha males decide to settle who gets the blonde from the agency with a fist fight, showing up at her door looking like two pieces of ground beef begging for attention. Like any sane woman would do, she slams the door in their faces and tells them both to go kick rocks. Meanwhile, the gray-haired turncoat cries in front of a blank wall begging for forgiveness for his teenage sins, and the coach purifies his soul with his classic, nauseating American compassion. The final game arrives. West Ham wastes no time and immediately shoves in two dry goals in the first half. In the locker room, the mustache casts his final motivational spell, making the crybaby grown men pull the torn pieces of the old yellow poster out from the depths of their underwear and tape them all to the wall as if they were summoning Exodia. The duct tape miracle works. The team's former spoiled brat scores a goal, and the jacked captain kicks a penalty with such brutality that the ball tears through the net's mesh, shreds the laws of gravity, and signs a black hole into the stadium. Watching his empire crumble, the billionaire villain has a psychotic break on the pitch, shoves his own coach to the ground, and gets chased out under the boos of thousands. Richmond wins the match using the repentant Wonder Kids tactic, but finishes in a glorious second place because real life spares no one. At the airport, the rich boss pulls the biggest capitalist flex possible, buying a wildly expensive ticket just to get through security and give her final passionate goodbye. Already on the plane, the weird assistant panics, fakes his appendix exploding, and flees the flight just to run back into the arms of his psycho girlfriend. In the end, everyone embraces their new reality. The journalist releases the book, changing the title so as not to inflate the coach's ego. The blonde proposes creating a women's team. The hairy grump takes over as Richmond's official manager, and our protagonist heads back to the United States to yell at a bunch of snot-nosed kids on a dirt field, ensuring his own son learns to have the memory of a goldfish.
Don't worry about all that, okay? What do we say, huh?
Be a goldfish.
That's right.